Our study today is in Genesis chapter 14. It really is a study of the consequences of the choices that were made in chapter 13, where Lot chooses to go to the area that is very fertile and promising, but also a land where the people are very wicked, and contains the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And we know that this will continue to give dark consequences to his life and the choice that he's made for his family. But in chapter 14, already before the ones that we're more familiar with, it shows the nature of the world in which Lot has put himself in. Because this is about war, it's about conflict, it's the world that really is something we can understand today. We might think, well, this is similar to what you see in this same region today, conflict and wars. But in more general terms, it's the whole world. It's the choice of being aligned with and involved with all the things that go on in our world. And we live in a time where we know more than we have ever known about what's going on every day in every part of the world. And it makes us mindful of that when we come to Genesis 14, because all you see is conflict and one nation or one king against another, or in this case, 4 kings against 5 kings. And that's not the only conflict that is represented in this chapter. And it's going to eventually pull in Abram, and he's going to have to try to help. But Abram is in a different kind of situation. We'll see a difference between the location and the surroundings of Lot that is all of this conflict, and what creates a real serious problem for him and his family and his holdings. But also we see Abram is over in a different part of the world and not even affected by all of this conflict, although nearby. He's not in those big cities. He's not in this political turmoil, you might call it today. And so the first part of Genesis 14 has a lot of names in it, names of kings. These sometimes discussions you have about, is this a certain historical king that we know of that has a similar name or some similar situation or from a similar place? We're not going to go into a lot of that because most of it, if not all of it, is speculation. But it's just a description of a group of men, a group of kings that basically are controlling this part of the world at that time. They are described in chapter 14, verse 1. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations. That's 4 kings. We won't try to identify them with historical figures. Some have said that maybe Amraphel is the one that has been discovered as with the name of Hammurabi, and is quite detailed in some of the things we know about him, and was a great conqueror at some point. And so also are these 4 kings. The context that is given here is that these 4 kings rule the world, and that world is not wanting to be ruled, and so they have to come along with their might and I guess you'd say put people back in their place. That will include the area where Lot lives, and the 5 kings that are listed in that area, including the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah. And so these are pretty much city-states, you might say. But they have forces, and they want not to be under the rule of these other kings that primarily are thought to be from the north, because when it goes bad for them, that's the direction they run. And some situations would indicate that it's Babylonia, that kind of history before the empire, you might say, but from that same area, because Damascus of Syria is going to be mentioned as well. So it's north of Canaan that they seem to have come from, but they control this region. In fact, all the way down to Seir in verse 6, they have to come and deal with some people in what we know of as Edom, which is south of Canaan or south of Judea. And so it's a wide area that these kings have come into for the purposes of this text and the purposes of the scripture. It emphasizes the conflict between these 4 kings and the 5 kings that represent the area of Sodom and Gomorrah, and also Lot and where he is. But it includes a lot more than that. In fact, the areas that are described in verse 15, the Rephaim and Ashtaroth, Carmane, the Zuzim in Ham, the Eman in Shava of Kirathim. We don't know all these for sure where they are, but then the Horites in their mountain of Seir, as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. So we're talking about far south in what becomes the land of the Edomites. So they're coming to deal with all of that, but after, you might say, they've made a pass through all of that, they return, it says in verse 7, and they deal with some people that are nearby that surround the area of Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's the Amalekites and the Amorites, and that's in verse 7. And so they're nearby, and one of the places that they have to put back under their thumb is Sodom and Gomorrah, and the 5 kings that are represented there that represent that military presence. And so in the process of all of this cleaning up and putting everybody in their place, this strong force that's able to do that throughout the entire region of this part of the world, they eventually get to the conflict with this small area around Sodom and Gomorrah. But that's the part that this chapter is paying attention to, obviously because of Lot and how it will draw Abram's activity as well. So they come together to have a battle. It apparently is not much of a battle. And if you go over to verse 10, the area that is described there is called the Valley of Siddim. And it says it was full of asphalt pits, so a very unstable, hard place to have a battle, things that are not stable in the ground. But it's also not stable for Sodom and Gomorrah's fighters, because it literally doesn't describe the battle that much. It just says that Sodom and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. And some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. And so the battle is not much. There's no match. And it's not surprising, considering that this great army, this great force has gone through this entire region, putting everybody in their place, taking what they want to take, and making sure that they are in control again. And so they have no problem with the same situation with Sodom and Gomorrah and those around it. And they take what they want to take. Verse 11, they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They have their way. They're doing everything they intend to do. And nobody stands in their way here with Sodom and Gomorrah. But in verse 12, we see why this chapter is included in the Bible. They also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. So the choice that Lot made to be a part of, you might say, this part of the world now has immediate consequences, and he is taken in captivity. All his people, all his goods, everything he has is taken away, led into captivity, and will be in captivity to these people. We're familiar with those kinds of stories in the Bible. And yet this is a great tragedy, or a great terrible thing that has befallen Lot. And Lot is the nephew of Abram. Well, Abram is known by someone in that area, if it's someone connected with Lot, or if just knowing who Lot is connected to, the word is going to get to Abram. And this is how it's described in verse 13. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth tree of Mamre, the Amorite, with the trees of Mamre, and Mamre is a person, the Amorite, who is the brother of Eshcol and the brother of Anar, and they were allies with Abram. So he is not only there and has prospered and settled there, but he has made allies with some Amorites, some people of that area, 3 men, 3 brothers, Mamre, Eshcol, and Anar. And they're going to help Abram. This is kind of the other side of the coin. You see Lot's turmoil and trials because he's aligned himself with kings that cannot hold their ground against these other kings, and he winds up being taken captive and losing all of his possessions as bounty to the victors, and so you just kind of see a difference, 2 sides of a coin. There's Abram in his situation. We'll see how blessed and strong he is, not only in himself, but also in those that are with him, that have become allies of him, friends of his, that are willing to help him in a difficult situation, put their lives and their possessions in line with Abram's, and that's what they're going to do. So here's one that's able to come and tell Abram that Lot, his brother, he says his brother, when he finds out it's his brother, well, they are brethren. It's literally his nephew, but they are brethren, and he tells him he's been taken by this strong force. Abram doesn't hesitate at all. The immediate response is obvious. In verse 14, now when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed 318 trained servants who were born in his own house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. 318 people at this point have already been raised, you might say, in the house of Abram and all those that are with him in his company. And he has 318 trained servants, in other words, able to go do what they're about to do militarily. And he has his own army. He's going to be accompanied by the 3 brothers that he's allied with, and it doesn't tell us how many they might take with them. It just says that they went with him, and yet the 318 are those that are born or part of Abraham's house and his company. And so he's got quite a force here. He has prospered. The Lord has blessed him in many ways. It's not just in livestock, but in servants, and able to field his own formidable army. And so he does that immediately, and it says he pursued them as far as Dan. Now, the tribe of Dan certainly doesn't exist at that point, because that will be a son of Jacob, who's the grandson of Abraham, and Abraham doesn't even have children at this point. But the obvious thing is the geographical location that the writer of Genesis now knows is the area where the tribe of Dan will settle, and that's near the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. It's on the western side of Canaan. It's really not terribly far from where Abram is, but he chases them because that's the direction they have gone. And so apparently that first stage is not a long pursuit. He chases them and catches them. Now realize who it is he's catching. He's catching these 5 kings, or these 4 kings that have been so powerful in the entire region that they've done whatever they wanted to do and taken plunder wherever they wanted to take it, defeated everybody, every place, the Amorites, the Amalekites, the people then in Seir, all along, there's been no seemingly force that can stand against them. And now Abram goes and catches them. He's not afraid. He's not taking into account the record or the power that they've displayed. He's going to go do something about Lot and his plight. And so he just picks up and goes as far as Dan, and that's where he encounters them to bring this to a head. And in verse 15, Abram doesn't hesitate. He doesn't pause and say, we're going to sit here across and look at each other, like a lot of times you see in the historical battles that they had, even in the Bible. But he just forms a plan and goes in to take care of what he's there to do. So in verse 15 it says, he divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants, so Abram's not standing back in the background, he's doing this actively himself, and his servants attacked them. And again, in this case, doesn't seem to be much of a battle here either. Now, this is the force that has 4 kings represented. They have had all this force that they've displayed in all that they've done in this region, in this whole area. And all of a sudden, here's Abram with 318 servants, and they divide into the forces that attack them by night, pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. Now, if we take that and put it on the map that we look at in the Middle East as far as the biblical times, that is a long pursuit. They run for what safety they can find to the north. They go from a place that's about midway in the coast of the Mediterranean in Canaan's coastal part, where Dan will be located. They go all the way from there, north of the Sea of Galilee, all the way to Damascus and north of that. And so if we look at this in face value, the pursuit is a long distance, but Abram is there to regain the things they are carrying, the people and the things they are carrying with them. He's not there to destroy them. He's there to regain what they have taken. And it simply says in verse 16, after he pursued them all that way, that he succeeded. So he brought back all the goods, and also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. So not only does he win a great victory and put them to flight, but he chases them long enough and far enough to regain everything that he put his purpose in doing this in the first place, especially Lot and all those that are associated with him. And the context of the chapter would indicate that this is everyone that's been taken into captivity, especially those in the area of Sodom and Gomorrah, because that's who's coming out now to greet him when he comes back. And he has all of this that he has reclaimed and brought back, not just the people, but the property, the goods, the plunder. And it just keeps saying, he brought it all. He recovered it all. That's how thorough the victory was. That's how thorough his recovery is. And now that's what he's bringing back in what must have been an impressive haul as far as the amount of people and the amount of property and goods that he returns with. And so word gets out that this has happened and it's coming, and now the kings that have been hiding because they were defeated, including the king of Sodom, they come out to meet this parade that's coming back after all this time. I'm sure much time passed in all of this, but now here comes everything that has been taken, and it's been recovered at the hands of Abram. And so verse 17 says, and the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is the King's Valley, after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him. So he defeated them all, brings it all back. So the king of Sodom comes to meet him, but he's not the only king that comes to meet him. Another representative that hasn't been mentioned before, will not be mentioned in the historical text again, but all of a sudden you have someone come from a place called Salem. And our lesson at this point is not going to deal with this specifically. The plan is to look at this specifically in our next lesson, and it has to do with a man named Melchizedek. And so we're just going to read what takes place as far as the events go, but we'll see a larger lesson with Melchizedek, the Lord willing, next time. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and he was the priest of God Most High. And he blessed him. In other words, Melchizedek blessed Abram and said, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth." That's the God that he attributes this all to, the possessor of heaven and earth. "And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And then it says, "He gave him a tenth of everything." And the he there that gave was Abram. All this that he has brought back is now going to be given. A tenth of all of that is given to this priest and king named Melchizedek. And Melchizedek is a priest of God Most High. The Bible simply says that. It is confirmed even in the New Testament in Hebrews chapter 7, that this is a true person in a true position of a true priest with God himself and before God himself. So we need to know more about him, and we will look at that, Lord willing, in our next lesson. But what he does is he blesses Abram, and in that Abram gives freely a tenth, something that has not been required yet by the law of Moses. It doesn't exist yet. But he gives tribute to God. That's what he's doing, not to a man, but the man represents God Most High. So he gives this sacrifice of a tenth of everything, so that he honors the one who gave this deliverance to him in the first place. And that's going to be confirmed here as he then talks to the king of Sodom. Now the king of Sodom, this verse 21, said to Abram, "Give me the Persians and take the goods for yourself." All this that he has brought back. Just imagine what all this plunder is. And the people. Well, the king of Sodom says, "We'll be fine if you just let our people come back. You take all of that plunder." You might say, well, that's quite sacrificial of him. I doubt seriously if it had to do with being a sacrificial man, wanting to honor Abram. I mean, he is dealing now with Abram, who has defeated the four kings, who has defeated the one that sent him hiding in the mountains and killed many of his soldiers, many of his servants. And so he's just trying to appease Abram by saying, "You take all the goods, you take all of that plunder, and just let our people go." But now listen to Abram's response, and this is the heart of the message. "But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to the Lord Most High, God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth." He uses the same phraseology that Melchizedek did. He says he's the possessor of all things, heaven and earth. And he says, I've lifted my hand to him. He has already discussed this with God. And whether God has told him to do this or he vowed to do it on his own, we do not know. But it's an indication that he is going to honor and give all this credit and everything to God and not keep anything on his own. He said, I've lifted my hand that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I've made Abram rich. He doesn't want to be beholding to Sodom and connected with him in any way. And if there is a part that God has played in this, God doesn't want him taking part with Sodom and having the things that Sodom would possess. We know about God and separation from evil people and evil places and practices. And so that may be a part of this from Abram's understanding from God. But also he simply says, I don't want this to be my possession because of you. What he has, he now attributes completely to God. And he's going to make it sure that it stays that way. He had the power, he had the right, he had the might, he had everything he needed to take and permission by the king to take whatever he wanted to. And he says, I'm not taking anything. I'm not taking a thread or a sandal strap or anything because I've promised God. And I don't want to be tied in with you, and I don't want it to seem that I have gained anything from you. He went to get Lot, and he delivered Lot, and he doesn't want anything, credit or profit from that. And he says, just you might say as fair, in verse 24, he says, except only what the young men have eaten, the ones that went with him, that you might say expenses included, and the portion of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. So he's being fair to them and remembering the help that he gets. That's things that we are glad to see for Abram. But the best thing that we see from Abram is that he is not taking this on his own. He does this with the strength of 318 servants in his own house and his own company. He's strong enough to defeat 4 kings and chase them all the way home, you might say, to get what he goes to get and recover. He does all of this, but it's never about Abram. Melchizedek points that out. They agree, and as Melchizedek says, this God has delivered this to Abram. And then Abram acknowledges that by giving 1/10 of all that God has delivered to and to this recovery. What a beautiful picture these two men, Abram and Melchizedek, make as far as serving God Most High. And one of those things is, Abram says, I don't want any ties with anything like Sodom and Gomorrah. And it's sad to say that Lot will go right back there and stay there, and that will cost him dearly. But with Abram, you see the maturity of trusting in God and saying, I don't need any of that. I don't want to profit from this in any way. I've done what God wanted me to do. I've done it in the way God wanted me to do it. And he blessed me, and I will trust that. And that's simply what faith does. And so we continue to see him grow. He's not all the way there in a mature faith, but we will continue to see him grow in that. And hopefully as we see him grow, we learn the things that we need to learn about growing our faith, like not trusting in our physical strength, not trusting in financial things or things that we might be able to accomplish because of God's blessings, but always knowing that we have what we have because God gives it to us. Regardless of what that is, every good and perfect gift comes from the Father. And he's the Father of what is light. And there's no need for that which is a shadow or a darkening for anything. And it's not any need of that in our lives. And so we see Abram make that choice to not make that connection and just make sure that he does the Lord's will. And hopefully we'll continue to grow with our faith as we watch him grow his. We'll talk about this Melchizedek, Lord willing, next time.